Did anyone ever knew that Final Fantasy got an anime adaptation? So if you did, either you still remember it, or you just completely forgot about it, or you just never even knew about it whatsoever. But if you're one of those people who just never even heard of it before, you're probably thinking that you might have lived under a rock or something. I mean, it's Final Fantasy after all, it's definitely one of the most successful RPG series out there. And I think we can all agree that it's definitely far from obscure. So you'd think that ever since that Final Fantasy Unlimited got announced, you'd think it would be like all over the place. I mean, when this thing came out, I never even heard of it. Actually, I never even heard about it until like 2 years ago. Well, anyways, yeah, they actually did make it into an anime adaptation. It just seems really odd that it seems like a lot of people forget about it, but either way, let's finally get to talk about it. But one thing I think I should mention before this is that, nope, this is not based after any of the games, it's actually its own storyline. Just figure I might as well say that at the start. Well, anyways, now let's fully begin. So it begins with two twin characters that are named Ai and Yu Hawakawa, and they have been searching for their parents for quite a while, but then they discover that there is a train that looks very suspicious. It's a train that leads them to Wonderland. Yeah, that just sounds pretty uncreative. Now, of course, I'm not talking about Canada's Wonderland, like the theme park, which is, by the way, a pretty kick-ass theme park. Instead, it's just a whole other world that's just called Wonderland, because, well, I guess they couldn't think of anything else better to name it. So while they're on the train, they end up meeting a new character named Lisa. And she works for an organization called the C2, but they don't actually call it that in the show. In fact, it doesn't even have a name, which is very odd. But if you actually read the after story, which was, by the way, only released in Japan, then you would know it would be called the C2 Company. But, of course, there's no way you would ever know that unless you looked it up or you actually understood Japanese and read it. So I'm not really going to count that as a part of reviewing the anime, because really it has nothing to do with it, but I figured I might as well mention it just in case you guys didn't know about it. So anyways, they end up going to Wonderland together, trying to look for their parents. And Wonderland really doesn't look anything that special. It actually looks almost exactly like the world that they lived in before, just, you know, not. I mean, I guess the only thing that's really worth noting is that there's actually like random monsters, and there's even chocobos. So eventually they do meet this dead guy that doesn't seem to be doing anything, but it actually turns out he is not dead. And his name happens to be Kaze, but he doesn't remember that, and he just really doesn't even remember anything. But all you gotta know is that he carries around a giant-ass golden gun, loads some kind of spirit bullets into it, and then when he shoots them, it summons an Aeon. And usually he helps out the main characters whenever they're in danger, just like in the first episode, where there is a giant mushroom monster who is attacking them, and then he comes out of nowhere, loads the gun, and then shoots some type of phoenix out of it, and yeah, he pretty much just like gets murdered. In fact, believe it or not, that's pretty much what most of the episodes are like. It's usually just like the two kids that end up going onto the train, going to Wonderland, and then they end up getting their asses saved by Kaze. Although at least there is some background to this going on, where there is an enemy named Earl Tyrant. Yeah, his last name has to be Tyrant because, well, he's a tyrant, I guess. And he wants to take over all of Wonderland all for himself. So it's pretty typical stuff here. There's not much I can really explain about. But I'll tell you one thing, this show is definitely fucking boring. And like I already said, it's pretty much just about them being saved by Kaze all the time while he happens to summon something out of his gun while they get attacked by some giant monster of some sort. Now, near the end of this series, there's only like 25 episodes. It does seem to trying to get interesting, but the time when that happened, I was just so done with the whole thing. So I really did not give a shit about its sudden burst of actually putting effort. But thankfully, this series is only 25 episodes and not like 50 or some crap. But because the story really was not interesting me whatsoever, it really did feel like it should have been 50 episodes long, because that's how long it felt like. And as for the characters, well, there's not a whole lot I can say. A lot of them, I just really didn't give a shit for whatsoever. I mean, Kaze definitely looks like a badass character. But other than that, though, I mean, he really doesn't do a whole lot other than save their ass and say a couple words here and there. So there's really not a whole lot I can say about him or any of the other characters. So yeah, I think you get the idea that the story in this one just isn't very good. Now, as for the animation, it's okay. I mean, there's not a whole lot I can say about it, but one thing I can say is that it does use a lot of 3D effects, and well, they definitely look very ugly, I find. Now, I know a lot of people hate it when animes use 3D effects, and yeah, I can totally see why. I mean, a lot of it just looks fucking cheap, and this kind of feels that way as well. I mean, the only show I can really think of off the top of my head that actually uses 3D effects to make it look really nice was the Black Rock Shooter anime. But as for the parts that are not 3D effects, they look okay, but there really is not a whole lot of detail to certain things, but other than that, there's nothing much I can really say about. Well, I guess the only thing left to say about the animation is the character designs, and well, a lot of them are not very compelling, although at least Lisa's character design looks okay, but I mean, that's it. And then, of course, Kay's definitely does look fucking cool, but, you know, that's really all about it. So overall, I guess I could say is that the animation just really isn't anything all that inspiring. And now as for the music, well, thank God I finally get to talk about something that is good because, well, the music is actually good. So one thing that is a glimmer of hope is that some of the music was actually done by Nobuo Uematsu, who is mostly known as doing most of the music within most of the Final Fantasy games. So that's a very good thing to have, and it also sounds very good as well. They even have the Victory Fanfare theme, which is quite funny. So thankfully the music actually does suit the whole Final Fantasy thing, and not only that, but it actually sounds good. And as for the opening, I have to say, I actually do kind of like it. It kind of has a vibe of Neon Genesis, which I think is a great thing because, well, as you know, even though I thought the show was only decent, I at least said that the opening theme song was fucking awesome. Now, I don't think that the opening theme song of this show is definitely not as good as that, but it kinda has that feel to it, which I do appreciate. And I also have to say that the ending theme is fucking awesome as well. Even though I'm not too fond of the vocals, at least the guitar and stuff actually sounds really good. Yeah, normally I don't talk about the ending themes in here, but I guess I'm also talking about that one because I actually really liked it. Then again, I also did say that in the Berserk review that I actually liked the ending theme of that one as well. So, thankfully, within the audio department, it's actually quite good. Now, as for the voice acting, it's pretty terrible, honestly. So not only did I not recognize any of the voices, but whenever I did try to look up information on them, I really couldn't find a whole lot. But whether if I know them or not, that's totally fine. But here's the thing though, all the voices are either very dry sounding, very boring sounding, very annoying, but it's just fucking bad. So I don't know what's worse, the voice acting in Final Fantasy Unlimited or the voice acting within Card Captors. Well, at least in English anyway. Well, either way, it doesn't change the fact that it's fucking terrible. And it's not memorable whatsoever, so yeah, let's get moving on. So last thing we get to talk about is the score, and well, if I were to rate this one, I'm gonna give it a 3 out of 10. Clearly, as you know, I think this show blows ass. But one thing I would like to mention is that I don't hate this show because it has nothing to do with the games or that, you know, it doesn't have Cloud in it or whatever. Because just in case you didn't know, I actually did enjoy the movie Final Fantasy Spirits Within, and yet that movie had nothing to do with Final Fantasy whatsoever, but I liked it because it actually had a decent story. Now, I'm not going to get too much into it, mainly because, well, this video is not about Spirits Within, and maybe I should do a video just talking about that, because I'm sure some people would be curious to know. But the point is that I don't hate this show because it has nothing to do with Final Fantasy or anything like that. I hate it because it just didn't have a very good story. The characters were lame as hell and definitely uncreative. Sure, it had some Final Fantasy references here and there, which was pretty amusing sometimes, but really, that's about it. The animation isn't really anything special, and the overall show is just really fucking boring as a plain board, and is just completely forgettable. I mean, if it didn't have the Final Fantasy name on it, it still wouldn't change the fact that this show would be good or bad, because really, the show just isn't very good at all. And now that I mentioned that it was forgettable, maybe that's why a lot of people have forgotten about this show, even if it has the Final Fantasy name on it. So there's not a whole lot else I can say, but before I end it though, there is one thing that you may find to be pretty funny about it, is that they actually did turn Final Fantasy Unlimited into a game. Yeah, that's right. They made a game based after an anime that was based after a game. It's almost exactly like the Street Fighter the movie, the game that they had. And in case you're wondering what Final Fantasy Unlimited is for, well, it was only in Japan, although that's to be expected, but it was on mobile phones. Yeah, I'm definitely not interested. So any last words I have to say about Final Fantasy Unlimited is that once you're done with it, or if you can even finish through it, you might need someone to give you some Phoenix Downs.